Another deadly school shooting claims the lives of 8 students and 2 teachers.
Police say the junior was armed with both a shotgun and a revolver. He opened fire just after school and started Friday morning at the Santa Fe High School in Texas. And this was after he allegedly pulled the fire alarm. Now, this is a school that had practiced for active shooters, had armed resource officers on patrol. Still, a massacre happened there, and by many indications, the shootings may have lasted for as long as 30 minutes.
All right, the question is to the details, pardon me, of this latest shooting. Give school districts around the country anything to prepare for the next time. Are schools rethinking how they do fire drills, etc.? Joining us now via Skype, Greg Shaffer, a 20-year veteran of the FBI. He specialized in responding to terroristic threats. Also a founding partner of the Shaffer Security Group, which is based in Texas. Greg, good to see you this morning. Terrible circumstances, but unfortunately, with your line of work, this is what happens. And the positive, you hope, is you can go back and look at this and see what can we gain from this to possibly protect more people down the road. When you look back at what happened in this latest incident on Friday, what did you see?
Well, you're absolutely right that we take every one of these incidences and we learn from them. And what I have seen is that the responses are getting much better, that the teachers, the students, and the police are much better at responding to these events more quickly, more efficiently, and that we're finding that the students particularly are not hiding underneath their desk anymore. You know, we have found, after looking at these, that hiding just does not work. You want to get out of the building if possible, and if you can't get out of the building, you then want to barricade yourself into the room and then look for improvised weapons to attack the individual should he gain access. So, you know, first and foremost, the responses are getting much better. But where I think we can get better is in the prevention of these kind of events. You know, this is a difficult problem that's going to have multiple solutions to it. There's no one size fits all. You know, the size of the school, the location of the school, how many floors the school has, all comes into play in designing a security plan to respond and to prevent these active shooter events.
But Greg, with all due respect, how can you say in any way that this is getting better? This lasted for much longer than we've seen before. As Steve mentioned, there are reports that this went on for 30 minutes. Where were the armed guards here? To me, it seems like it actually failed these students and these administrators who died, 10 people in all.
Well, that's certainly true, but you look at the number of kids that were in that school, I think the student body was over 1,000 kids, and they were able to isolate the shooter. From the sounds of it, looks like the 2 school resource officers both responded, one critically injured, and they were able to isolate the shooter so that he didn't have full access or wasn't able to freely roam the entire campus, where much more people could have been killed. So I think when we look at the after-action report, and this is still an ongoing investigation, we'll find some more details as time goes by. But the initial reports look like they may have been able to isolate that shooter to be able to prevent him from actually doing more damage than what he did.
Greg, a two-part question for you. One a little more broad and the other more specific. I'll start with the specific. The fire drill has come into play several times now as a measure, some would say, in the criminal mind to get the most people into a public space as possible to create the most possible damage. Do we need to rethink the way that we do fire drills or that we respond to fire alarms in schools? That's question number one. Question number two is, in the grand scheme of things now, as we move forward, do we put more effort into trying to find the potential next school shooter, or do we put more effort into making sure that kids have a safer way to exit the buildings when it happens?
Well, for your first question, you know, my recommendation would be to have 2 separate alarm systems in the school, one for fire and one for active shooter response, because oftentimes what you are going to do are different in those 2 aspects. In a fire, obviously you want to get out of the building. In an active shooter, yes, you want to get out of the building as well, but if you are able to determine that the shooter is right outside your room, obviously you don't want to run out to the hallway with him sitting right there. So you want to barricade yourself into the classroom and shelter in place. So, you know, I think we should start designing rooms to have, or schools to have 2 separate alarms, a fire alarm and an active shooter alarm. And getting to your second question, you know, again, this is a multifaceted issue with multiple holistic approach that needs to be taken to solve this problem. So we need to look at, you know, possibly identifying those students that are more at risk You know, 95% of active shooters of schools are students or former students. So we need to do a better job at identifying who they are, but at the same time, we also need to harden the schools. We do need to make it more difficult for those students to get, guns into the school. Will that include magnetometers? Yes. Will that include an armed response? Absolutely. But will that also include, better counseling, maybe a better methodology where students and those being bullied have a way to anonymously report that they're being bullied? Or again, you look at these students, particularly the one down in Parkland, the students were able to identify who the shooter was before he was identified. They know who those at-risk students are. And we just need to make it easier for them to report their ideas, report their fears to somebody at the school, and then that school needs to have a methodology in place to address how we're going to do that. And whether that's doing what we call a threat assessment on the individual, where we talk to his friends, his families, we identify whether or not he has access to weapons, are there weapons in the house, and then we bring that individual in and talk to that individual to determine whether he is a true threat to that school.
Greg, we got to end it there. We really appreciate your insight. I think that we all can agree on the fact that if we never have to talk about another school shooting where someone's child does not come home at the end of the day, we'll all be better for it. Greg Shaffer's head of Shaffer's Security Group and with the FBI for 20 years. Thank you so much this morning, sir.
Thank you very much.
Among Greg's resume, he helped to implement a security plan for the Super Bowl when it was in Dallas, Texas. So he knows the importance of magnetometers there, which he just brought up as a possible help for schools.